Hello, this is Deep Sekali. I'd like to show you a little bit of how the agent skills work in Claude. These were released on October 16th by Anthropic. What's interesting about them is that they have a virtual machine sandbox that goes with each skill. So looking at their blog, you can see here that when you have an agent that you build, when you're in the chat window, you get a dedicated virtual machine where you can interact. Claude can actually execute stuff. So the best thing to do is to actually go into the Claude desktop app and see this in action. So in here, I'm not going to type a regular prompt. I'm going to ask it to say, run ps-aux. I would like a list of processes that are running. The question is, where is it going to show this stuff? So you can see here, it's running it, and we're going to get an output. So you can see the output right here. I got some real output from a Linux that you'd expect from a Linux command. This wasn't kind of generated by the model to pretend it's this. So let's say to it, where did you run this command? And it should tell us that it ran it in a Linux container on Ubuntu 24. Interesting. And there's a working directory called home Claude. Okay, well, let's tell it to run ls/home Claude. Let's see what do we find in there. All right. And we find there is a cache, a config. So we have a virtual machine, and this virtual machine is running. We could ask it information about this virtual machine. Let's do run ls/. Let's see what's at the root of the file system. And there is a bunch of files in here. Oh, look at that. There's a container info JSON. I wonder if it will let me see what's in there. So let's do cat, and let's do /container info.json. I think it shouldn't let me see this, but maybe it will. Oh, look at that. Okay, so we do see that there's a container. We do see the container's name. And that's kind of interesting. So this thing is so sandboxed that lets you poke around to see what's running on that virtual machine. Well, let's see, does it have Java? Run java-version. And yep, it has java-version. It has a Java 21. So I could upload a jar file in here and execute it. So what's kind of fascinating to me about this whole thing is that there is a dedicated virtual machine that's available to me. So let's ask it, how much memory and CPU does this VM have? And now it's just going to go poking around, executing a bunch of Linux commands to try to figure out how much memory is available. And it comes back and says, yeah, there's 4 CPU cores and 9 gigs. That's a pretty generous allotment of resources. Let's actually try as an experiment whether it has access to the network. So we'll see if it can access this URL. Okay, so can you curl, and we're just going to give it the URL. And if it has access to the network, it'll be able to get it, right? And it says it looks like the curl request to Wikipedia was denied, and so it used what it calls its web fetch tool. So what's basically happening here is that anytime you try to go over the network yourself, it blocks you. But if you use the web fetch tool, it can go and download things. I can actually ask it to poke around and say, what can you tell me about the network? Do you have access to the internet? And let's see what it comes back with. Okay, so it can't curl, it can do web search. It's going to go here now and check to see look for IP addresses and things like that. And it will eventually, usually it discovers that there's an Envoy proxy in here. So we'll see if it does it in this test here. All right, and I'll say, what can you, let's see, okay, this time it didn't talk about it. So let's say, is there an Envoy proxy that is controlling your access to the internet? No, that's... All right, and it thinks there is an Envoy proxy because it found some environment variables pointing at the HTTP proxy to use. And because it's running on 15,001, it thinks it's Envoy. It does look like this might be running on Kubernetes because there's a star.services.cluster.local. And so, yeah, there's suspicion that there is one here. Now, one of the things about this is we can actually ask it to, for example, generate code. So let's say we ask it to write a Python program that prints out hello world, then run that program. Okay. Normally, you wouldn't ask it to do something so simple. But the point is that I'm trying to illustrate here is it's going to write a file to a particular location, and we can actually see that file. And you can see here it saved it in home Claude hello.py and ran it without any errors. Now, if we also look at the skills that it has, we can say to say ls/mnt. Let's just go through the file system to show you what I found. So when you look at the mounted file directory here, we're going to find there's a directory called skills and there's a directory called user data. Okay, let's tell it to ls. Well, actually, maybe we'll tell it something a little bit more interesting. Oh, it's actually telling us. I didn't even have to do anything. So within user data, there's uploads. That's if you were to upload a file with the plus sign here, it would get saved there. Anything that is downloaded or any code that it generates, it'll usually put in outputs. And then there's the MNT skills directory. Let's tell it like this. I want you to print out a directory tree by kind of similar to what the tree command does for the contents of the MNT folder. And let's see what it comes back with. It's kind of funny. It's actually generating a Python program to do what I want. What I've seen it in the past do is like maybe make a bash script. Now it's going to take a bit more time because it is a little bit more complicated to write that script. So you can kind of start to see here, like under MNT, there's that skills folder. And within skills, there's some examples, like algorithmic art and various other things. There's one called public. These are the ones that are like production quality, where Anthropic basically shipped the ability for Claude to make Excel files, PowerPoints, Word files, and work with PDFs. And there's a user meeting prep one that I created. And then there's the user data directory where there's like you have the stuff you upload and download. Okay, what I want to kind of show you now is something interesting about these ones here. if you go to the Claude skills repo, you find within that the document skills PDF. Let's go take a look at what's in here. There is a skill.md file which kind of defines, provides information to Claude about what's this skill and how to use it. It's kind of like a cursor file or a Claude.md or an agents.md type of situation. And what's interesting about it is that it tells it like what kind of code to write to do different things. So for example, if you tell it to merge two PDFs, this is the code that, an example of how it can write code to do this. But the question is like, where's this code, the actual Python code, not the thing that invokes it? And that's what's interesting about the skills, is that a skill can have a directory called scripts. And in that scripts directory, you can have a bunch of Python code. So in this example here, there is a fillable fields, or let's just try extract form fields, right? So you can see here it's importing some PDF reader, and it's got a bunch of code to do stuff. So this is purely deterministic. If the skill, if Claude decides to run this PDF extract fields, it's not going to be using the probabilistic model to do stuff. It is in fact running an actual Python program that was written by whoever authored that skill. And as an end user, you're allowed to make your own skills, write your own Python, and all of that is going to run inside of this constrained environment. So let's see what happens if we ask it to do something. Like there is a skill called algorithmic art. Okay, we can say, can you run the algorithmic art skill and show me some art about AI. Let's see what it does. So you can see here what it does is it's going to read the algorithmic art skill documentation to figure out what it needs to do. And then it's going to, like the way that this algorithmic art works, like you write some sort of text that describes the art, and then it's actually going to generate something from that. So while it's on doing that, let's actually look at the algorithmic art skill. So go here, skills, and algorithmic art. And there's a bunch of templates, and you can see here that it's got some helper JavaScript that it runs. So that's kind of neat that you can create an agent, which is nothing more than some mix of instructions in the form of markdown files, like we saw here, for example, Excel, and then there's some Python code that's attached to that can do things. And this is still running, so we'll see what we got at the end of it. All right, so it looks like it finished up, and it made me some artwork. And neural emergence, okay. And I could, I don't know, type some number here. I don't know what this does. Interesting, okay. So that was something that was generated. So let's actually see, we've got some HTML code, which means that's it's in that folder. So if I now say something like, let's just say ls mnt, what was it, user data outputs. All right, you can see that was the HTML file that it created for me. Now, what's kind of taking a step back and just thinking about what we just saw, what they wanted to do is to allow humans to kind of customize Claude, but you want them to be able to create agents. Now, the agents need tools to execute. And yes, I could build an agent in a single programming language like Python or Java or C# or whatever. but then I would probably want to have it interact with different things. Let's say I wanted my agent to do something like convert a file from a JPEG to a PNG, or shrink it or increase it. Well, there's some tools that do that. And if I go here and I say, do you have a tool on the VM that can resize images? It should come back and tell me it has Image Magic, which is a CLI that you can use to do this. Yes, the VM has Image Magic. And so this is a very powerful model where you can have this sandboxed environment, and that sandboxed environment is like almost like a virtual machine. It gives the agent quite a lot of power. And I think Claude is the first one that allows you to kind of really have a VM. When you play with this and try to have a similar conversation to this with ChatGPT, it'll tell you it only has a Python interpreter. That's all it can do. It doesn't have a general purpose VM. Gemini didn't have anything like this when I asked it if it did. So I hope this exploration of sandboxing in Claude was useful to you.